Hey, what is up everyone? Pocket here, and welcome into our first video of our newest series, Keystone Breakdown, where we are going to be doing keys and then breaking down everything that happens inside of the key. We're going to talk about what we did wrong, what we did right, tips and tricks, boss and trash mechanics. And this is great if you're a new player or if you're a veteran player trying to improve your routes and your gameplay in these dungeons. And then we'll also be talking about Resto Druid because that is what I am playing right now. So we're going to be starting with this plus 22 Waycrest Manor. In our group we have me healing on the Resto Druid, Augmentation Evoker, Demonology Warlock, Assassination Rogue, and Vengeance Demon Hunter. And the affixes that we're looking at are Fortified, Volcanic, and Spiteful. And just to have a little bit of reference, my current item level on this character is 475. And for our consumable buffs, we decided to go with the Devilishly Delicious Eggs and a Phial of Tepid Versatility. Alright, so let's jump in and get started. For this first pull, the idea is we are going to run in, pull this entire first group, and drag it all into this hallway and burn these ads down with the hallway ads as well. The idea was to pop a lust, that way we have the most amount of damage and we can cleave this stuff down relatively quick. So we're not going to be expecting too much group-wide damage coming up in these pulls. It should be pretty easy. What we are wanting to look out for is Etch and Shadow Cleave. Shadow Cleave is a frontal that the enthralled guards use. So your tank can aim these, but if he aims them in a poor direction, it's the big purpley arc on the ground. You just want to make sure you don't stand in that because it will most likely kill you. And Etch will randomly target a friendly player, and it is a 6-second single target channel, and left unchecked, it will completely kill you. So whoever has Etch on them, you want to make sure that you are healing them up as much as possible so they do not die to that. And there I was teasing my augmentation buddy. He, at the beginning of the key, said I was a bad healer to all these pugs. And when he was supposed to pop lust in this hallway, he never did, so I had to give him a hard time. And eventually, we're going to pop lust here. In this pull as well, we're going to get runic marks, which are the blue circles that you see around people's feet. And that will do damage over time to that person, and once it is either dispelled or expired, it will do damage in an AoE around that circle. So what caused our deaths here is I didn't heal enough during the etch that was on me, which ended up killing me, and then while I was running back and making my remark to the evoker, he also died to the other etch because no one was healing him. So just make sure etch gets healed. We also have Spirited Defense, which can be kicked. All it does, it provides a 35 reduced damage to that person. So as many kicks as you can get on that, perfect. If you don't get kicks on it, not a big deal. We're finally gonna pop our lust now that all the trash is dead. So hey, at least we did something. And a runic mark is a curse, so it can be decursed. So I am playing a druid, so every time you see one of those panels turn purple, that means they have runic mark on them, and I usually immediately just dispel it off of them. So we clear up the corridor trash with no other issues, and the tank here is going to pull both packs of toads and acolytes over here. This is awesome because it's going to line of sight them all in the doorway that we can get those AoE stuns and AoE silences out. The acolytes are going to cast Bone Splinter and Drain Essence. You just want to try and kick those as much as possible. And then obviously when the toad dies, they drop those swirlies on the ground. Don't stand in that because they hurt and stun you. We also end up picking up the patrol from further down the hallway, and we just end up cleaving down and killing those guys along with this pole here right before the first boss. And just like how a healer needs to stop for a mana break every once in a while, we need to stop for an energy break. So grab a little drink there, and then we get back in there and start healing. Alright, so now we're going to jump into the boss fight. We're sitting around 70% mana, which isn't too big of a deal. It is fortified, so we did pop our lust previously. We're not going to have it here in the first boss, and because it's fortified, it's going to be a little bit easier. So the first witch that's going to be active is Sister Solina. And during the duration of this fight, when one of the bosses are active, you cannot do damage to the other two bosses. So this is considered a single target fight. So Sister Selena is going to start off by mind controlling one of the players. That's pretty easy. You just need to DPS that player down as quickly as possible. The other ability that Sister Selena uses is called Aura of Apathy, which emits a dreadful aura reducing healing done by 50%. Now during this first phase, that's not going to be too big of an issue. We'll come back around and talk about that in a second. The next boss that will become vulnerable is Sister Malady, and the two abilities that she's going to use is Unstable Runic Mark, which is basically the same exact Runic Mark that we talked about a little bit earlier, and the other one is Aura of Dread. Aura of Dread inflicts shadow damage every 1 second. This effect stacks. Stacks are removed by moving, so during this encounter you want to make sure you are constantly moving while Sister Malady is the targetable boss. And just keep in mind too, Aura of Dread and Unstable Runic Mark do not coincide. So if you dispel an Unstable Runic Mark, you're still taking stacks of the Aura of Dread because it comes from the boss while she's active. And then the last witch that will become vulnerable is Sister Briar. Sister Briar's aura is Aura of Thorns, which inflicts physical damage every time she's struck. And then she will also cast Jagged Nettles. Jagged Nettles will inflict an initial physical damage and then as well physical damage every 1 second until the target is healed above 90% of their maximum health. So as a healer, we need to make sure whoever has Jagged Nettles on them, we need to get them up as quickly as possible. So now once Sister Briar gets down to 50%, the cycle is going to loop back around and it's going to go back to Sister Selena. Now I mentioned Sister Selena's Aura of Apathy earlier and how initially healing reduced by 50% is not that big of a deal when you start the fight. Where this does become an issue is if you don't quickly take care of Jagged Nettles. If you don't take care of Jagged Nettles quick enough, you're going to roll into Sister Selena's Aura of Apathy, and while trying to heal that person up to 90% of their maximum health, you're going to have 50% reduced healing, which is going to be a huge issue. So if you're going to use a large single target healing cooldown or a defensive, it's always the first phase and first Jagged Nettles that you're going to want to use that at, because at the very end, since Sister Briar's the last boss, if she uses Jagged Nettles and you don't heal it up fast enough, you're not going to go into a different phase. So you always want to use it on the first phase. And we do end up losing 2 players during this boss fight. First, the Augmentation Evoker, and then he gets Battle Res, and then the Demonology Warlock goes down. And let's be honest, looking at their defensives, they did not use a single defensive during that whole phase. So during the Sister Selena phase, that is one of the best times that you can use your personal defensives because that's the most amount of damage. So don't die without using your personals, come on. Now with the boss dead, I am going to waste time here using a resurrect. It probably would have been way faster for this guy to just release and run back. The tank didn't bother waiting, nor do I think he should. Tank's going to keep going and constantly pulling. If he's confident to pull alone without a healer, then it shouldn't be too big of an issue. Once again, we're going to go in and hit this pack, and what we're looking for once again is Etch. Etch is going to keep hitting our rogue here, and we're going to keep trying to keep him alive constantly. No one else is going to need a whole lot of healing, so whoever Etch is on, and I do have a little icon that pops up telling me who it's on. So here we're going to cast Iron Bark on the Warlock because he has Etch on him, so that's going to lighten the load on keeping him alive. And once that witch goes down who casts Etch, now we just have to look out for those frontal cleaves, so not too big of a deal now. As soon as this pack dies though, we are going to need some mana. We're sitting really low, and this Demon Hunter is not stopping. He's just going to keep going. And sometimes if you're playing healer, you can ask your tank to slow down, but come on, you don't want to be that guy. You're just going to have to figure it out. This is actually going to be really valuable practice for me as well, because I don't ever use Innervate when I play my Druid inside of Mythic Plus dungeons. I feel like I never need to. I always have time to stop and get mana, so now that this Demon Hunter is just pulling like an absolute madman, I'm going to have to try to problem solve a little bit harder, figure out what I can and can't cast, figure out who's the priority based off of different abilities, and this is where Mythic Plus, I find it most enjoyable, is when you're put into these situations. If you are getting low on mana, you want to keep Life Bloom up on yourself and your tank all the time. You never want that to fall off, and then just use Efflorescence, and that will do a nice blanket healing across everyone as long as everyone is standing in Efflorescence. I know sometimes that can be an issue, but for the most part, if you're low on mana, that's a really good thing to do. And then you can always just throw out a Grove Guardian every now and then. And as a healer, I do pay attention to people's defensives. If you look down at my healing bars there, you can see everyone's personal defensives above the bars. And sometimes when people are taking damage and I look down there, and if I see they have not used a personal defensive yet, I don't usually put them as a prio target for healing. Now, this tactic doesn't work very well if you're playing with bad players, but if you're playing with decent players who know how to hit their defensive buttons, is usually a good rule of thumb. If you're seeing that all their personal defensives are on cooldown, yeah, you definitely need to heal those people. You need to focus them and get them back up because they have nothing else. And if you are playing with those lower end players and they give you crap for not healing and you look down and they don't have a single button push for their personal defensives, well, you can just shove it back in their face and tell them to click their defensives next time. But that's if you want to be a toxic player. And so far, we are doing a fantastic job at keeping everybody alive with our tiny bit of mana that we have. And you know, I'm not going to stop and tell the tank that I need a drink. I'm not going to slow the group down. I guess it's like a healer pride thing. I don't know. But we do still have Lust on couple minute cooldown here, so we're just gonna clear trash until we can get Lust to use it on the boss. So that's what we're doing here. That's why we haven't engaged the boss yet. If you, and this works in any dungeon, if you want to save Lust for a certain time period and it's just not up yet, clear some trash, get some of that percentage, come back. It's always a reasonable thing to do. Most of the time too, you will see on these specific pulls that the tank will run in, grab all the trash, and bring them out. This is awesome, especially on a spiteful week where you're caught in those terrible corridors where your camera angle is just awful and you can't see anything. It's really nice just to come out here into this courtyard, kill all the trash, and be able to kite things around if you need to. You just want to make sure that your tank is using his personal defensive when he runs in by himself, and or you can pop a few hots on him as well as he runs in. Just make sure that you do line of sight everything around the corner, that way you're not getting targeted by every single ability. Another thing that is saving our mana is making sure we are utilizing our clear casting procs for regrowth. Those are the little leaves that you see on the outer edge of my character right now. That tells me, hey, we have a clear casting proc, regrowth is now going to heal more, and it's going to cost 0 mana. So anytime, if you're playing Druid, you get a clear casting proc for regrowth, you should use it. There is no reason why you shouldn't, because it doesn't cost you anything. Fun little trick too while playing Druid, if you are in combat, you can always just pop Shadow Meld and immediately sit down and start drinking. That way, if they're still clearing up the trash, you can sit down, get some drinks in while they clean it up, and then move into the next pull. And that way, as we are now, we're at 100% mana going into this boss. So now a quick overview of Soulbound Goliath. He has 3 abilities that you really need to look out for, which are Soul Thorns, Soul Harvest, and Burning Brush. So Soul Thorns is going to target a random DPS player, and it's going to cause physical damage over time, stunning them, and the only way to get them out is by destroying the thorns from the other 2 DPS players. On this boss, it is crucial to stack up next to the tank if you're a DPS player. That way, if you get soul thorns on you, everyone can just use their AoE cleave damage and help get you out while maintaining damage on the boss. If you're a BM hunter, because I know it's you hunters, you guys are going to stand all the way in the back of the room, you're going to get this on you, and then you're going to wonder why no one gets you out. So just make sure you're standing underneath the tank. Next ability is for the tanks and the healers is Soul Harvest, and this is going to buff the tank 5% every 2 seconds. So he's going to keep building up these stacks and keep doing more and more damage over time. So if the damage is too much to handle, you can drag the boss through one of the fires on the ground, and that is going to cause him to pretty much explode and emit fire waves, inflicting a whole bunch of fire damage every 1 second for 6 seconds. So now if you play a healer, you know that this is awful, and you would love if the tank would never drag the boss through the fire. And you know what? If you have a tank who knows what they're doing, who knows how to cycle their defensive abilities, and you know, a healer that can keep them up and use their external defenses on them as well, you can do this entire fight on a plus 22 and not ever have to drag the boss through the fire, which is what we do right here, which is awesome. Love to see it. However, if you are going to do the mechanic, the best way to do it is drag the boss through the fire after every second Soul Thorns. You never want one of your DPS players to be in the Soul Thorns during when you drag them through the fire. You want to make sure that they are out, but after every 2 is a good rule of thumb if you don't know where to start with that. But please do not drag him through the fire every single time that you see fire. I've had that happen. It was not fun. Now that we got Bloodlust on cooldown, boss is dead, we're just going to go back to clearing trash on our way to the next boss. And real quick guys, if you are enjoying this content, please give it a like, subscribe. I also have similar content. I have a 0 to hero challenge that I did with a Resto Shaman, playing Shaman for the very first time. And if you're curious about my healing bars at the bottom of the screen, that is called Voodoo, and I have a video on how to set that up, or at least on how I have it set up. So if you like this kind of stuff, like I said, I appreciate all the support, and I hope you guys keep coming back for more. So once again, thank you. Alright, now let's talk a little bit more about Resto Druid. So we did mention one of the combos earlier, which is pretty much for the most part keeping Life Bloom on yourself and on the tank constantly at all times. Now let's talk about the Swift Mend, Soul of the Forest, and Wild Growth combo, which can also be paired with Flourish. So using Swift Mend, that is going to consume one of our hots on a current player, so they have to have a hot on them to use Swift Mend. But once you use Swift Mend, it's going to proc Soul of the Forest, which increases the healing of your next regrowth or rejuvenation by 150%, or your next wild growth by 50%. So most of the time I use wild growth, I usually don't use it without using a Soul of the Forest proc, because that's going to give us 50% additional healing on our wild growth. And for massive single target healing, that can be used as regrowth to give you 100% increased bonus, and that can be paired with Nature's Swiftness, which is going to make your regrowth an instant cast and increase that healing by 100%, which it does stack, so you're going to have a overall 250% increased healing. And after all that, if you still need a little extra healing, you can always pop Flourish, which is going to increase the time and the rate of healing of all of your hots that are currently active. And as I was saying earlier, if you are tanking and you're trying to pull all the trash out here into the courtyard, just make sure you have some defensives. We did lose our tank here. I did not have any hots on him as well because we were dealing with the trash that was still here. I didn't see that he had run all the way in there, and I did not put any hots on him whatsoever. So kind of our fault on both of our parts. I should have had more healing, and he should have been prepared with his own personal defenses. Now, some of the things that you need to look out for in these trash packs before Raal the Gluttonous, one of the biggest things is the Devouring Maggots. Some of them will cast the ability Infest, which will pretty much target somebody and cause more and more maggots to spawn if this does not get kicked. So if you can kick Infest, make sure that gets kicked, make sure it gets stunned, knocked back, whatever you got, don't let that ability get off. Another mob to look out for in here are the Pallid Gorgers, and the thing you gotta look out with them is going to be Ravaging Leap, and this is going to be a bleed over time effect, and this targets people that are furthest away. So now you watching this video, you know this, and nobody else is going to know this. Make sure that you are as close as possible to the tank, that way you don't get this target on you and the furthest person away guy does. And then they also are going to cast Wretch, which is a frontal cone. It can be kicked, but I would say that kicking the Infests are more important than the Wretches, because the Wretches can be dodged, but if you have nothing else to kick, you might as well. And then the last mob you really need to worry about are the Stewards, and they cast Dinner Bell, which is that big yellow circle that you'll see on the ground. Obviously you don't stand in that because it'll silence you for 10 seconds. Now moving on to Raal the Gluttonous, this boss fight is pretty straightforward, pretty easy, not a whole lot to deal with. But the things that you are going to really have to look out for are Call of the Servants. So Raal is basically going to ring a bell, and 4 servants are going to spawn at all 4 doorways, and they're going to walk towards him. What you need to do is make sure that they do not reach him, whether you're a DPS or if you can do a little healing as a healer, you just want to make sure that they do not reach him. However, they can be stunned, rooted, knockbacked, all the above, so you can slow them down by using any of those. So what happens if a servant does reach him Well, he's going to cast Gluttonous Bile, and this is just going to cause group-wide nature damage 1 second every 8 seconds to all players. Once the first one gets through, it's not that big of a deal. This is a stacking mechanic though, so the more servants that reach him, the more damage is going to do. But for the most part, like if 1, 2, 3 get through, not a big deal. And towards the end of the fight too, if you can kill him fast enough, you can use a root or something on these servants and not even focus your damage on the servants. Just kill the boss and don't even worry about them if you haven't rooted. It's easier to make a call like that when you're in voice comms, obviously, but if you're playing tank and you see that the boss is almost dead and all the servants are coming out and he hasn't eaten any yet, just say focus boss, you know, and that way the DPS and healers will know either to just focus boss or to root some of them and then kill the boss. But for the most part, it doesn't do a terrible amount of damage if he has 1 or 2 stacks on him. If you're getting up 4 or 5, you're gonna have some issues. And then obviously he does a giant frontal cone and puts green swirlies on the ground. Obviously don't stand in those, avoid those. The green patches on the ground reduce your movement speed. They also will spawn oozlings. Oozlings should always be a cleave target. You should never have to focus those down, just to make sure that the tank picks them up and then everyone can cleave them down, and they're really not that big of an issue. So now as we move down here downstairs, these trash packs are pretty much the same trash that we've seen throughout the rest of the dungeon. One of the things I didn't talk about though are some of these witches. So the witches that are back up in the courtyard, they're going to use an ability called Infected Thorn, which is going to target someone and cause lots of nature damage. This can be dispelled, it also can be kicked, but it will stack as well. So they cast this a lot. Try and kick this as much as humanly possible. These should always be your focus target because they will keep casting this and keep applying it to more and more people, and most of the time this is what's going to kill you. And the witches down here are very similar, but they are going to cast an ability called Soul Bolt. Once again, this can be kicked, so kick it if you can. And they will also use an ability called Fragment Soul, which can be dispelled off the tank. Other than that, pretty easy for the basic witches. Now, if you end up pulling Matron Alma, which is the mini boss witch that is down here, she has a different set of abilities, one of which is Decaying Touch. This is going to be used on your tank and increases damage taken by 15%. This should be your dispel focus every time, so if you are pulling her with multiple people, multiple mobs, you just need to make sure that that's getting dispelled over the other ones. Another ability that she has is Ruinous Volley. This needs to be kicked at all costs. Do not let Ruinous Volley get off. This does so much damage and it can simply be mitigated by a simple kick. So if you're holding your kick, hold it for that. And the last ability that she uses is Dread Mark, which is pretty much the same as the runic marks that we've talked about previously. It just leaves lingering dread, which is more damage after the fact when it gets dispelled. So not too big of a deal. You can curse dispel it, you don't have to, just a little extra damage you have to heal through. Again, there are bewitched captains in this trash pull that use the Shadow Cleave. That's that frontal cleave right there that I keep almost getting hit by like 3 other times while we're doing this trash pack. So don't get hit by the cleave, don't stand by your tank during those pulls. Now, how much percentage do you need before you go down here and not have to come back up after Gorak Tul? And the answer is 89.18%. I believe this will put us slightly over, so 88% is kind of the rule of thumb, but if you're following this route that I just did, you won't have any issues. Anything below 88% and you're gonna have to be talking to Lady Waycrest and go up top after you're done with Gorak Tul. So make sure you just get all your trash before you go down, you'll save that time. One of the abilities that I forgot to talk about earlier that we will see throughout this entire dungeon is the Warding Candles. Warding Candles is those like candles that you see on the ground, and then they make anyone standing in those like big and glow blue. They reduce all damage taken by 50%. So make sure if you're tanking, please pull the trash out of the Warding Candles so we can kill this stuff faster. And contrary to popular belief, the Warding Candles only does defense. It does not increase their attack power, so they're not going to do more damage, but they're just going to last longer. You're going to have to do 50% more damage to kill them, so just pull them out. And moving down to this trash pack down here, this can be a tricky pull. Like, it's pretty easy. This is all stuff that we've seen throughout the entire dungeon. However, if we don't get the kicks on the bolts, your team's gonna die. So if you don't have a coordinated group that knows how to kick properly, pull these groups one at a time. If you run down here and pull everything down here, which is possible, but if you don't have good kicks, don't do that. It's not gonna go well. You're gonna die. All these soul bolts are gonna get off. All the ruinous volleys are gonna get off, and it's just gonna be a shit show. So one at a time. If you don't have a coordinated group, if you do, feel free to pull them all. Not a big deal. Alright, now moving on to Lord and Lady Waycrest. This is a 2-boss encounter with 2 different phases, but to start out, you can only attack Lord Waycrest. The big abilities that you're going to have to look out for on this fight, starting with Virulent Pathogen, which is the green circle that you'll see underneath people's feet. This can be disease dispelled. If you don't have a disease dispel, not a big deal. It's still going to go off regardless. Keep in mind too, if you do dispel this and this person is surrounding other people in their circle, you will give it to everyone around you. So do not immediately dispel it, and make sure that they are away from the group. And then once it goes off or gets dispelled, it's going to leave contagious remnants on the ground. Don't stand in it when it goes off. Green swirly equals bad, obviously. And then the other thing you gotta look out for during this phase 1 is Discordant Cadenza, which Lady Waycrest is going to just keep casting, which are those purple circles that you see on the ground. Don't stand in them, they do a bunch of damage. That's really all there is to it. So as you see Lord Waycrest's health go down, it's going to jump all the way back up to full health. And that's because Lady Waycrest is taking her own health and giving it to him. And every time she does that, she gives him a stack of Putrid Vitality. And this is going to increase his damage and haste by 3%. So he's going to have a maximum of 3 stacks by the time we enter phase 2 here. And during this phase 2, as the tank, make sure you pick up Lady Waycrest. You have aggro on both the bosses here. All DPS, you need to continue to focus on Lord Waycrest. He is the primary target that you want to kill. The tank should maintain on Lady Waycrest, maintaining those kicks and stuff that makes sure they're not getting off. Or if you're DPS and you have a mouse over macro who can get kicks pretty easily, that's what you want to do. However, just make sure you're staying on Lord Waycrest, as he is the most dangerous target. And then once Lord Waycrest goes down, then you can kill Lady Waycrest. As you see here, Lady Waycrest does go down first, which is fine. It's not a big deal. Most people think you gotta kill Lady Waycrest first, but looking at their abilities, Lord Waycrest does significantly more damage than Lady Waycrest. So just kill the Lord first. Now moving on to this final trash bag. Going into Gorak Tul, I've actually never dragged all this trash onto boss, and that's what we're gonna do right now. And the biggest issue with this was not the damage output. It was in fact that when Lord Waycrest spawns those little ads, which we'll go over here in a second, during the boss fight, I couldn't tell which one was the ad that needed to be lit on fire and which one was the trash pack we had. So that was the biggest issue. We have some problems here. But moving on to just a quick explanation of this fight. The first thing that he's going to do is he's going to spawn a Death Touch Slaver, which is one of those little ads that jump around. And they are going to use Dark Leap, which they will jump to the furthest person away and do a small amount of cleave damage. And they also have an ability called Death Lens. Do not let this get off. Death Lens will stun the target, and it can only be interrupted by a stun. So a basic interrupt will not work. You have to use a stun, a knockback, or something like that. And then they die and their corpse remains on the ground. Now when Gorak Tul reaches full energy, he's gonna cast Dread Essence, which is gonna do a bunch of damage and resurrect any of the death touched ads that were on the ground. So to make sure that these ads do not continually get resurrected, anyone can pick up Alchemical Fire on the ground and then cast it using your extra action button, throw it on the ground, and burn the corpse of the Death Touch ad, so that there's only ever one spawning. Because if you get 2, 3, and they all start casting Death Lens, that can be an issue and people are going to die. So the goal is to never have more than one Death Touch Slaver up at a time. And that's kind of why I died, and we did lose the rogue as well. I was throwing the alchemical fire on the wrong ads. I'm not really reading the names, just kind of look for the body. So I ended up throwing on the wrong one. We had too many deathlands going out. I died, the rogue died. Luckily, we still had our battle reses, so we got everybody back up. And now that the bodies are despawning, it's a little bit easier to see which ads I need to throw it on. And here I just kind of throw it. Once again, I have no idea if I got the right one or not. I actually think I missed and didn't hit them again, but not a big deal. We're still looking just fine. So let's actually count to see how many we have up right now. We have 4 death touch slavers, 5. Currently have 5 death touch slavers up at the very end of this fight. Super chaotic, but we end up killing the boss, timing the key, and that was a really good time. So I appreciate you guys for sticking around and watching this video. So if you've made it this far in the video, you obviously enjoy this content, and this content is for you guys, and I appreciate you. And then I'm gonna ask your opinion. If you've also seen my 0 to Hero challenge videos with my shaman, I'd appreciate you guys if you left a comment and compared this video to those videos and kind of give me a little feedback of which one you liked better and why. That way I can kind of improve and get better at making content like this. They are very similar, but they are different at the same time. So let me know what you guys think. Once again, I appreciate you guys. Stop by the stream, give me a subscribe or a follow, and we'll see you guys in the next video or see you in the live stream. All right, guys, we'll see you later.